Kung Fu Panda 4 is not an immediate love from me. And I'm kind of having trouble coping with that. Hey guys, it's Cameron from Met at the Movies here, giving you my review and overall thought process on Kung Fu Panda 4. So, following the last movie, Po's biological dad, as well as the rest of the pandas, have all moved into the Valley of Peace, but Shifu tells Po that it's time for him to pick a successor to be the next Dragon Warrior, because he wants to move Po up to being the spiritual advisor of the valley. But a new villain is on the rise, a shapeshifter named the Chameleon, who is planning on taking the appearance of other kung fu masters and eventually taking their abilities. Po meets up with a thief named Jin, voiced by Awkwafina, who tells him that she can be of some assistance in helping him take down the Chameleon. Kung Fu Panda 4 may have been the most anticipated movie of the year for me. I have been a huge fan of the franchise ever since I saw the first one back in 2008. Really spoke to me at the time. I saw it right around the time that I was just starting to get my real interest in filmmaking. I think this movie was a big part of starting that. Since then, I have seen every single one of the films in theaters, as you can see here. And in the months prior to this film coming out, I was telling my best movie buddy Josh, I honestly feel really fortunate as a Kung Fu Panda fan, because all the movies have been great. Critics and audience opinions have leaned pretty positively on it, to the point that the three movies are now slowly starting to enter the conversation of all-around great trilogies. Josh is a Star Wars fan, and honestly, I've always felt kind of bad for him, just because I know how polarized that fan base is now because of Disney's handling of it and the movies being kind of hit and miss, to the point that there's not even a soft majority consensus of what the fans think anymore. And I've always thought I would not be able to handle if that's what the Kung Fu Panda fan base was like. Now, we've had the Nickelodeon show, which had some bad characterization and some definite bad episodes, but, you know, that's removed enough that I don't feel like it impedes on the greatness of the films, and I'm able to just not accept it as canon. Plus, there are some episodes of it that I actually really do like. So yeah, I was nervous as hell going into this film. I've accepted the fact that the Kung Fu Panda franchise is just never gonna win the Oscar for Best Animation. The movies are probably never gonna gross more than $700 million. But still, just let it be successful and let critics and audiences generally agree that they're good. And the first three movies did that. But this fourth one may have slipped a notch. And I am upset to see that a lot of fans are kind of disappointed. I am a little bit too, but not for all the same reasons. So let's talk about some of the things with this movie. As always, Po is great. This movie is what started me off as a Jack Black fan, and he really knows how to bring the humor, but also just the heart to this character. I love that we see Po try to diffuse situations and showing Jin that there's another way around certain situations. Even in a lot of their fights, he's simply just defending and trying to redirect. He's not really trying to hurt anyone unless he has to. I like that, and I think that's very appropriate for Po. Viola Davis lends her acting chops to our first villainess of the movies. She brings a level of threat that's pretty palpable. She doesn't use her ability to disguise as much as I would think, but it is kind of all part of her grand scheme, so it doesn't feel wasted here. I'm not always a fan of Awkwafina's character, but not necessarily because of Awkwafina. I know there are some people that just either don't like her voice or her shtick. She's fine for me, even if I don't always like her character. I am glad, though, that even though she's the crafty pickpocket character, that she doesn't always have the upper hand. We see her get surprised, and even though she's a formidable fighter, we see Po get the upper hand on her just as often as she does. I do find it funny how in Raya and the Last Dragon, her character was all about how much you have to trust people, and in this movie, her character is all about how you have to trust no one. No mention of Mei Mei at all, so that was a completely abandoned love interest, which is fine. I didn't really want Po to have a girlfriend. The Furious Five are not really in this. The movie explains why, and we do get an appearance from them later on, but don't expect them to be playing a part in the story. Instead, we see a lot more focus given to Mr. Ping and Li, Po's two dads, and how much they worry about him. And if I'm being honest, I think I actually prefer that to focus on the five. Probably my favorite scene in the last movie was when Li and Mr. Ping had their own heart-to-heart talk moment. So seeing them here in a little bit more of a lighthearted setting, honestly I think they make a really good duo, and it's interesting to see how both their different approaches still just come together with how much they want to protect their son. We've got a lot of new sights in this one, new locations, big locations, and really helps expand the universe that we've been seeing so far. And a lot of new character designs, too. In the first movie, we mainly just saw geese, pigs, and rabbits as background characters, but here they've got quite the menagerie to choose from. The movie's got bears, bulls, rams, wolves that don't just look like copies of the wolves from the second movie, and even a badger. Although, honestly, he probably had the ugliest design, so I'm not really sure how to feel about that. Either way, we've got a lot of variety with the characters. Most of the humor is still very good. While I think the third one still might be the funniest, or at the very least the jokiest, this one still brings a lot of laughs, except for that one joke in the trailers that I was dreading and really hoping they would cut from the final movie. But where the third one probably strayed the most away from actual kung fu fighting, what with its distraction tactics and fight in the spiritual realm, still awesome, but admittedly not traditional kung fu. This one, though, brings it back with a lot more hand-to-hand stuff and brawls that the series has always done really well. A lot of creative action sequences here. I was a little sad when I found out that Jennifer Yu Nelson wouldn't be returning to direct. I honestly don't think she gets enough credit for just how great a directorial debut Kung Fu Panda 2 was. The directing here is fine. They kept it in-house with DreamWorks, so I'm glad they didn't just outsource it and bring someone totally new in. It's perfectly good direction, even if I do feel like it's not quite the same. The score is still great. The first Kung Fu Panda movie is actually the first soundtrack that I ever bought. At one point, though, they did do an orchestral cover of Crazy Train. I thought I was crazy for a second, but Josh heard it too. I'm not sure if I like that or not. Also, Jack Black is oddly a great choice for Hit Me Baby One More Time. The lessons these movies promote are always good ones. This one's all about accepting change and moving on to your next step in life. As someone on the autism spectrum, I struggle with that a lot. And I really do identify with Poe's desire to just stay where he's comfortable, especially when you're someone like him who had to deal with so much disappointment within himself prior to getting the title of Dragon Warrior. I really do get how he's like, okay, I'm in a place that I actually like now. I don't want to disrupt that. Very identifiable. And now I'm gonna get into the purely personal reason why this movie's premise was never gonna be for me. When I heard the potential that this was going to be a passing of the baton movie, my whole demeanor just sank. I did not want to see Poe stop being the Dragon Warrior. I did not want to see that premise. It really ticked me off when they did that in the climax of Cars 3, and I didn't even like that franchise. My friend was quick to remind me, though, that I do like some passing the baton movies. I thought Ghostbusters Afterlife was pretty good, which is true, but there are some key differences with that. One, that sequel came out over 30 years after the original. This one's had 16 from the first and only 8 from the last. 2, it's animated, so time passing doesn't really matter as much. You're not really seeing the characters age with the actors. But there's a much bigger reason why I wasn't liking it here, and it really just has to do with me personally. So, I saw the first Kung Fu Panda movie just before my junior year of high school, and for the next 4 to 5 years in high school and college, I wrote my own Kung Fu Panda fanfiction trilogy that was entitled The Next Dragon Warrior, where I introduced my original character, a young badger, who idolized Poe and would eventually get chosen to be the second Dragon Warrior and learn from Poe. And yes, this was total wish fulfillment escapism, but I'm still decently proud of it since, well, it was the first time I'd ever written anything that was over 30,000 words long, and then I did it 2 more times. So, seeing DreamWorks do a similar thing that's not what I was so close to for multiple years, it just kind of made me sad. This was something that was just very close to my heart that I did have to eventually accept was just never going to be canon. But having to accept something similar happened that wasn't my thing. I know it sounds so dumb to be upset about something like that. You know, in all my years of auditions and seeing the cast list go up, there was always that heartbreaking day when I realized I didn't get the role I went for. And it was always right whenever I found a way to build myself back up and find a way to be okay with that I got the second wave of realization, which is not only did I not get the part, but someone else did. And I was now going to have to watch that person do what I wanted to do for the next several months. That's the closest I can come to explaining just how I was feeling with this movie's premise. And as good as I think the message in this movie is, it also just kind of feels like it's included to be just a little bit of a jab at any naysayers who don't like this. Oh, well, if you don't like the fact that Poe's no longer the Dragon Warrior, maybe you just need to be better at accepting change. Bite me. Okay, maybe I do, but keep in mind, in my fanfiction story, my main character was not made to replace Poe, just to work alongside him. I made sure I was not giving Poe the shaft, and I gave him as much reference as I could. Maybe sometimes too much. And again, I realize this is a ridiculous reason to be upset about this film, and it is purely a personal reason, but for my first time viewing, it does affect my opinion. And honestly, as the envy or resentment wears off, I think this film is going to grow on me more. Or maybe I'll just come to hate it more like everyone else. But I don't think it's going to reach the heights of the first three for me. And I think that is just a testament to how high the standards were set by the previous three films. And I'm just kind of sad knowing that this is the first time a Kung Fu Panda film is not going to be my favorite film of the year. I mean, it currently is, but that's mainly just because we've had such a bad year to start off with. But I don't even know if it's going to be in my top 5 by the end of it. I just don't know. I do want to make it clear, though, this is not a bad film, and I am still very grateful for that. You can tell that there was still a lot of care and heart that was put into this film. It's not an abysmal failure, but it's also not what Puss in Boots 2 was. But the fact that DreamWorks made that too makes me think there's still potential for future Kung Fu Panda films to outdo this one. The Rotten Tomatoes consensus's negative take on this is that the franchise is running out of steam, which that's not really my issue I had with this film. Honestly, I find that kind of a weird assessment when there's currently so many other franchises that truly are just running on fumes, and in much costlier ways. Some criticism is being delivered at the screenplay, and I think it mainly might just be for a couple surprises that really aren't all that surprising. One of them is a second act twist, and yeah, it was kind of predictable, and the outcome as far as is Poe gonna choose a successor is also... I'm pretty sure everyone saw it coming, but I also think that the movie kind of knew that, so they don't really play it up as a huge surprise like other films I've seen screw up with that. So when I saw Tai Lung in the trailers, I was actually kind of excited for that. And I know, movies that make callbacks to previous villains can sometimes feel a little desperate. But when I saw him in the trailers, I was really hoping it would be more than just semblance. I was hoping that there would be some actual character attached to it. And there was. Without getting too spoilery though, Shin and Kai, not as much. And I know there's going to be some fans upset about that because fans love Shin. I do too, but I often feel like Tai Lung gets a little pushed aside because of that. Because I've heard so many fans talk about how Shin is just such a better villain than Tai Lung. And I mean, for me, I can't choose. I love all three of them. But Tai Lung is still the most sympathetic villain to me. Tai Lung screwed up an opportunity that he had worked his whole life to achieve. Shin screwed up an opportunity that he was born into. There's always going to be something that has me sympathize a little bit more with Tai Lung. And because of that, the movie makes a choice that honestly might be one of my favorite things in the movie. Without getting too spoilery, in the final third, Poe and Tai Lung do get to have a couple small exchanges, and by the end of it, they seem to be on good terms. And part of the reason I love that, and this could just be my past years of reading fan fiction, but I truly believe that Poe and Tai Lung would be friends in another life. And I don't know that I could say that about any of the other villains. Maybe Kai, since he was friends with Oogway at one point, but definitely not Shin. And to see them end on amicable terms here, they really didn't have to include that in the film, but I'm so glad that they did. It honestly reminds me a lot of my favorite scene in Zootopia, where Judy reconnects with her old bully, Gideon Grey. Again, that's a scene that they really didn't have to include in the film, but I appreciated so much that they did include it. And I thought for sure that it was just going to be a facade, and Tai Lung was going to turn on him or just say something nasty in response. But they didn't, and that was probably my biggest thanks of the film. If I were to rework the pre-existing story of Kung Fu Panda 4, here's what I'm thinking. Scrap the character of Jin entirely, and instead of having Shifu announce that he wants Po to pick a successor to be the next Dragon Warrior, have instead his announcement be that he intends for the Furious Five to disperse amongst China to spread his Kung Fu teachings. Keep the lesson about accepting change and have the fact that the Furious Five aren't going to be around anymore be the thing that Po is having a hard time adapting to. But before that can happen, they find out about the chameleon, and Po and the Furious Five go off together to take her down. Keep the subplot about Poe's two dads following after to make sure he's safe, and then double down on the fact that the chameleon is bringing back old villains. Make it like a Kung Fu Panda version of Spider-Man No Way Home. Keep the exchange that Poe has with Tai Lung, and along the way, Poe learns to accept the change and realizes that him and the Furious Five had one pretty great final mission together. And you can end the film with a big goodbye of all the Furious Five leaving and Poe staying at the Jade Palace. And then you can still bring them all back for a sequel if you want. I may have just found my headcanon. Yep, that's what happened. That's what I saw in Kung Fu Panda 4. I still want this film to do well. I'll probably go see it a second time like I have with all the other Kung Fu Panda films. Box offices have been kind of weird since the pandemic, especially with animations. Disney films are flopping, and Pixar's Elemental had to be a slow sleeper hit in order for it to make its money back. But the Mario movie has proven that it is possible, so I really don't know what to expect here. I'd love for it to match the $600 million range like the other three, but I really just don't know. I am glad that the next Spider-Verse movie got pushed back, because now there's no direct competition with any other animated films, and I'm not even sure if there's any other family films coming out soon, so it might have that to itself for a while. So that's about all my major thoughts with this film. What are your thoughts? Were you disappointed? Did you think it was fine? Did you think it was just as good as the others? Regardless, this is still a franchise that I am so proud to be a fan of, that I've given plenty of money to over the years, and continue to do so. If you want to hear more stuff like this, you can follow me on my Letterboxd, or on Facebook or Twitter at Met at the Movies.